Okay, who would like to go next?
Please let me go home.
Okay,
Can I?
all righty. You may proceed.
This is not a paying job.
Okay.
Okay.
Good point.
My name is Leslie Schwarze. I'm from Marin County. This is now the home of virtual education. I say that because my friends and I are basically sending our children to school for socialization, which is important. It really is. It's important to learn how to get along with other people, your peers, teachers, because I look to them as sort of like what a boss would be, so my child has to learn how to be a subordinate and how to deal with different personalities, and that is why my child goes to school right now. She learned to read at home. She's going to be getting a math program starting this summer that we're going to pay for, because I don't like what's going to happen with new math, because I do sit on my math committee at the district, and we are going through the process, and the process is 3 years long. So I've given up on her learning academics at school. So I'm here. I've followed this since she was in kindergarten, and Ms. Mazzoni knows a lot about my daughter's kindergarten year because she was sitting school board president that year. And the one thing that people haven't mentioned today, the one word I thought I would hear but I didn't hear, was constructivism, which is a philosophy of education, and whole language is part of that philosophy, and it's huge. I found out my daughter was involved in a kindergarten program that was originally a preschool program used in Michigan for a group of kids who were, going through a Head Start program, and her program was, the way they explained it to us was, if the children asked to be taught something, then they would be taught it. But if they didn't, then they wouldn't teach them, because the children wouldn't want to learn it unless they owned their own knowledge. And their example that they used was this child that had played cards all year, the year before, and they thought that was fabulous because the kid loved cards so much. And we sat there that night thinking, this is sick. So from that night on, I had gone in feeling very good about school. I really was happy. From that November of her kindergarten year, and she's now in 3rd grade, I have been militant, and probably known as militant in my district. It's very upsetting because I don't understand a child having to display a desire to learn in kindergarten. It just amazed me, and the program they used was called Alpha Blitz. She never learned anything about the things they're talking about here. No, there wasn't phonics, phonemic word, nothing. Alpha Blitz. They blitzed right through it. I don't even know when they actually did it. So we taught her how to read that year at home because my mom had taught school for 27 years, and I had old open court books and old Lippincott books, and they were systematic, sequential, explicit, and these are going back a long time ago. This isn't new stuff. So anyway, she learned to read that year, and she was fine, and we did get transferred out of that school because it turns out it was probably the most progressive school in the district, and she went to another school, and she's had a fine education.
Progressing which way?
Pardon me?
Which way was the school progressing?
Well, oh, geez. Yeah, well, with high scope, I guess the statistics, the only thing they can bear out with that study is that the children who go through that program, if it's a preschool program, are 5 times less likely to be arrested for a major crime when they grow up. And I was so thrilled to learn that. The school, by the way, didn't tell me that. I learned that when I called the institute in Michigan to find out what it was that they actually did. And, the school would never have said that in my little neighborhood. Can you imagine in Marin County selling that as a feature to your program, that you're not going to get arrested after you grow up? Anyway, so she went on to 1st grade, and she had a fine 1st grade teacher, knew all about this program, got her through it, corrected all the mistakes that came from that program. But in her school, the new school, and all of the schools in this district, the Miller-Unruh teachers were running the reading program at the time, not the regular classroom teacher. So that person was coming in and giving classroom instruction. It was almost assumed that the 1st grade teachers did not know how to teach reading, which I honestly don't think is true. That's the way they had set it up. So she was doing things like the choral reading, all the things you've heard about today, and it didn't hurt her because she already knew how to read. And she was getting all the good things that you get at home in a family where both parents are educated. She was okay. But what about the kids who didn't have that? And there were plenty in that school because there was a new class started in that first grade year. They hadn't had the same kindergarten experience as the children who normally went through this regular traditional school. They all were coming from traditional progressive schools where the parents were upset and they wanted to be moved. So in this new classroom, we had sort of a picture of what happens when you haven't had a good kindergarten. And these kids, she'd come home and tell me stories about, kids crying while they were being asked to read. And she came home one day and said, I don't read as fast as everybody else. And she described what was going on. And I said, well, they were chanting. And there wasn't really reading, but they were all listening. And she thought that was now reading. She was very confused. And I said, just don't look at the book. You'll be fine if you don't look at the book. So she stopped, and she was fine. So anyway, this is the kind of thing that's going on, and this is Marin County. Now, Marin County's test scores aren't all that bad. But, there's a reason for that. There are 70 private educational therapists in Marin County. That's a county with not a lot of kids. And they see almost entirely at this point people with reading programs, beginning reading programs. They're not teaching anybody about math because we haven't really gotten far enough along to ruin that yet, and we'll do that in a few years. But they're teaching these kids how to read because they're not learning at school. And we don't have reading recovery in our school, but we have a son of reading recovery. I think like a cheaper version, and our district has had 85% of the teachers trained. They've spent over $100,000 now on this training program. And the kids who've gone through this, the results are, and I'm not kidding, this is third grade. When you get stuck, number 1, look at the picture and think about the story. Number 2, go back and read again. Number 3, say the beginning sound and slide to the end of the word. Number 4, read to the end of the sentence. Number 5, now have a try. Does it make sense? Does it look right? Does it sound right? Number 6, go on. Meaning, just, forget about it. This was hard for me. This was asked after the task force report. I wouldn't have been objecting to this last year. Okay, they were operating in ignorance at that point, in my opinion, since they weren't reading any research. This would have been okay, but this year, just maybe don't give it to her. They didn't have to do this. This happened later in the year. They'd all read the task force report. It was not necessary. The other thing is, I participated on our program quality review, and you've heard a little bit about that today. People have been talking about that. And that's now called, and I want you to know this comes from our county training, Program Quality Self-Study. And the people that come in as your coaches, who are supposed to be these alleged overseers who are going to rip away your books or write you down and say you're doing all these terrible things, they used to evidently do that, and that's what everybody tells me, but I am here to testify they no longer do that. They are now your critical friend. And when you go through the program, they were very supportive. We actually came up with a solution. We were studying writing. We decided we don't know how to spell. We write really well because we've all gone to Bay Area Writing Project, and that's part of California Writing Project, seminars or workshops that, teacher and service days. We write really well at our school, but we cannot spell. Now, if there was a program out there for these teachers to now look at using for a workshop, I'd like somebody to tell me, because I don't think there is. The programs that got them to where they are today are out there, and they can go do them again, but there's nothing to give them what they're lacking. The county, our county, unlike the ones that spoke here, have not been on top of this the way everybody else has, and in fact handed us a document when we went to be trained, again, after the task force report and the bills, that stated, most young children do not have enough experience with language, more specifically with written language, to be able to generalize vowel rules to their reading of text. In fact, students who overdepend on phonics rules in textual reading are poorer readers. These readers never quite seem to realize the purpose of reading is to understand written messages, rather than sound out words. If the truth were known, many of us remember learning the 2 walking vowels rule as young children, but few of us knew how the rule applied until we met the 2 vowels walking together hand in hand in our teacher education programs. So I asked the trainer, where are you guys with the task force report, and what about the legislature and the bills and stuff, and why are you giving me this? This absolutely is ridiculous. And she said, it's just political. And that's the way the whole thing is viewed. It's just political. She meant that you wrote these, your laws imply a position that they're not going to have to listen to because they're really above that. And so you're being handed, and I get this every time I ask a question as a parent. Don't you trust that I know what's best with your child? I get that every time I ask a question. They're basically saying the same thing to you. I mean, if they're not listening, that's what they're saying. They don't trust you.
Go ahead.
A question. Do you
Yeah.
think that the socialization process, and which I think is very bad, do you think it's worth,
Sending her to school?
yes, what the detraction from her education?
No, I absolutely. I mean, the things that I'm having to fill in at home are still, I don't want to say minimal, but you know what? Because I can do it, and because I'm a stay-at-home mom, and because I'm well-educated from a well-educated family, I can do it. It's pathetic to think somebody who doesn't have that kind of background does it. It's pathetic. And it makes me sick to think that the reason I can do it is really basically an elitist reason. It's really wrong. So because of that, that's really what's kept me motivated. I could do this at home, and I wouldn't even have to come here. It bothers me because I know there are people out there who don't have the capacity to do it or even know there's a problem. And they're living right in my neighborhood. Kids who go through this program at our school, the parents either figure out there's a problem and go out and get a tutor, or send them to Sylvan or Kumon or one of those centers that's available, or they go through the system until 4th grade, then they find out the kid has a problem, and then all of a sudden it's a family problem, as you've been told tonight. So it's really a sick problem. If you try to tell the schools, in fact, in our district, the ones who are least likely to figure out there's a problem are the ones with no Chapter 1 children and no children with poor test scores, because they don't have a clue that we're out tutoring behind their backs. And when you tell them that you supplement at home, they get so angry that you're not welcome to volunteer in the classroom anymore. Yeah. So that's really, it's amazing. It really is.
Ms. Schwartz, if I could return to that little flyer you're reading.
Yeah.
That is a reading recovery approach. That's the exact same approach used by reading recovery.
Only we're getting but I guess for less money, I'm getting a version that's not.
And the reason why
trademarked.
we've expressed concerns here today is that there are 4 major studies of reading recovery showing that doesn't have any long-term positive
I know, it
effect.
doesn't stick.
Doesn't stick, and as a result, the senator has called for a performance audit of reading recovery, since there's a lot of schools spending a lot of money on that program. A lot of us are wondering whether or not the $4,000 or $5,000 we spend per child in some of the reading recovery programs could be spent on extra teaching aids, teachers, or phonics textbooks, staff development, and actually teaching systematic intensive phonics at the very beginning. We wouldn't have to have.
But I don't know if you
remedial program.
can with this. I mean, you need to take the $4,000 or $5,000 that the Miller Unruh teacher gets per child that this costs or whatever, and send her away for deprogramming. And I don't mean that as offensive to this particular woman. It's just that I know, in having dealt with this for 4 years, this is not a problem that can really be solved with some of these people. And I guess I'm a little obsessed with it because I go to school board meetings. I'm the only parent who has watched this presentation for the last 3 years of this program. And, the first year, no phonics was mentioned. Second year, all of a sudden, there's phonics in that program, by gosh. And because this year, that's the word you're going to use. And someone on the school board finally said, this is becoming rather expensive. Is there going to be an end to the cost here? Could we possibly transfer some of the training to volunteers? And they said, oh, no. Only credentialed staff are capable of learning this, which I'm sure is fine, true. But if you were using a program like the one they were talking about in Houston, there's also tons of data showing that they can service through volunteers these kids for a nominal amount. So I'm going to send away for their volunteer program and start it this summer in our district for free. It drives me nuts that everybody's making money off this. I should too, but it makes me sick, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get parents together and teach them how to teach their kids, so that when we ride through the 3 or 4 years that it takes to get this whole thing working, before we find materials, we'll solve our problem. Because these are individual children who are being hurt as we make decisions that I can tell you, if we hadn't had Bill Honig come and speak to our parent group, which caused all sorts of scandal in our community, because it was a horrible thing that I did, having him come to speak to a group of parents. There would never have been any newspaper articles about it. It wouldn't have brought anybody out of the woodwork. No one would be doing a thing before the 3 to 5 years it takes to go through the process of adopting a new textbook. That's that many more kids that are hurt. So just to follow up on the end, some of the things you said tonight I've taken notes on. Our school's an AFT school. That document is a fabulous document. I'd love to give them a multiple choice test so they could even guess at some of the answers that are involved in that magazine. It's fabulous. They haven't read it. They have not read it. And the ones who have say, we're already doing it. So they don't comprehend it. We also have this idea that you can do waivers. I have heard about waivers since my kid was in kindergarten, because I have a friend who says, there's waivers, go after a waiver. These people, by nature, are not waiver-oriented. They are sheep. They will follow. And it's not because they're sheep because they have to be, or that they are by nature. It's because the system doesn't allow them to think as individuals. And the way these wonderful people want to be here, if they could, they would. But they're punished just like I am for speaking up. Believe me. This is part of the whole situation. I'm punished for being a loud parent, but believe me, if there's a teacher out there who says, it isn't working, guys, they're punished too. They're either moved to another school or they're given some god-awful job, but they're punished. So they do the next best thing, which is do it in the classroom and be quiet about it. And do what you know is best and handle what you can. The last thing I wanted to say is that in regards to the older children, like middle school age, and you were referring to those kids who are looking or need help, there are some programs available for remedial middle school intervention programs. And we even have a school who's asked for a grant through the Novato Education Foundation for something like that. It's tragic to me that they have to go after grant money for remedial reading in a middle school that doesn't have any Chapter 1 kids. And they don't have the nerve to go back and tell their feeder schools that they've got a problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great testimony. All right, let's, Mr. Gordon's going to speak next, but while he's getting ready to speak, let's bring the rest of the people up here. I know there's 2 or 3 more people, and I want to thank everyone here for being so patient. This has been a much longer hearing than we anticipated, only because the subject is so fascinating. Never before in all the hearings I've attended have I seen so many members of both the State Board and the Assembly Education Committee, and even a member who's not on the Education Committee, sit so long, because we all believe this topic is so critical to the future of our state. And I think we're just spending a lot more time than I anticipated, because we have a lot more questions, and it's just fascinating here. So let's try to, this is the last of the public comment, I believe. Anyone else out there? Yes. So let's try to keep the comments fairly short. Don't repeat someone else. Let's try to keep your comments focused on items of information that perhaps we haven't heard yet.
Mr. Chairman and members, Kevin Gordon with the California School Boards Association. In the interest of moving forward,